Welcome to the Real Estate 401k Show. Here are your hosts, Ryan Gerdes, Mike Weinstein, and Justin Frederick, helping you build a legacy of wealth through real estate. Powered by the Recon Group at West USA and the Frederick team with Fairway Mortgage. NMLS number 625918.
Well, Ryan, it seems that wire fraud is all the craze these days.
I don't really remember a time where it hasn't been a big conversation in this industry. I mean, I feel like there's more like fail proofs and safety features now than there was 20 years ago when I first got in this industry. But I mean to tell you, like, I personally have never I've never experienced it, but I've been in the same office of people that have, and I know Bianca, I mean, you guys probably see at least attempts all the time, and maybe a couple of people that have been successful. I don't know.
Well, with that, we do have our good friend from Fidelity National Title, Bianca Lemmons, back on the big show. She joined us a couple weeks ago to talk about vacant land fraud, and now we're talking about wire fraud. So, Bianca, what is wire fraud? What the heck is going on? Because we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being ripped off from people.
Yes, absolutely. And it is still rampant. It's been rampant for quite some time. And it's basically where money gets diverted. What happens is if protocols aren't in place.
That's like a nice way of saying stolen.
It's stolen. It's stolen. And there's a very limited.
Honey, I diverted that $100 in your purse.
Well, that's another story that I have for you. But no, I mean, basically, and there's such a small amount of time leadway to be able to try and stop and divert that, incorrect wiring of funds. Wire fraud normally will happen on a Friday for reasons because once that money gets to the first bank, it's overseas, over the weekend. And once it gets there, you just can't get it back.
So who are typical victims in wire fraud when it comes down to real estate? And how does it happen in a real estate transaction?
Yeah. So basically anybody is a victim of wire fraud. In a real estate transaction, it is usually the buyer and the seller, or anybody, even the realtor themselves, anybody who is exchanging information via email. And, we all get these emails that we're not sure whether it's junk or spam or a fraudulent email. And so if you're clicking on a link from somebody that you think is a good link, you've basically exposed your security levels in your computer. So now the fraudster is phishing your emails. They're watching our conversations throughout the whole transaction. So the scammer knows exactly when to make their move, get in there, and basically send an email saying, oh, I sent you the wrong wiring instructions. Here's the new account that you should be wiring your money to. And so if the consumers aren't aware and educated on inquire before you wire, pick up the phone and call your escrow officer or whoever you're wiring the money to.
You just got all the one-liners today. Wire before you wire.
Yeah, that's a real.
We're going to take you out on the road with us.
I feel like I preach this on a daily basis, but hey, I'm happy to if it's going to save somebody a loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
But yeah, bottom line is inquire before you wire. One of the biggest things that we educate is if you're getting instructions to wire your money via email and they say, oh, call this number in the email to verify the account information, don't. Pick up the phone and call a trusted number of your escrow officer or realtor.
Well, one of the things that we do this is a discussion that we have with all of our clients prior to even start working with them, that you are never to wire any money without giving me a call or calling you directly. Don't talk to anyone else. Always verify that information and always be careful when you open your emails and things like that. And we'll talk about different ways you can safeguard yourself. I don't know how many calls I get at the beginning of a transaction. We're representing the buyer or even the seller, and now we're 2 days or a day, 24 to 48 hours into the process, and they call me and they go, so I got this email from Bianca. Is this legit? And that's how I know we're doing a good job at protecting them and warning them and preparing them.
Yes. And so our practice and my team's practice at Fidelity is We typically don't even send wiring instructions to the buyer until we actually physically have a phone conversation with them. Because again, I think once you're talking with them, they have a little bit more level of trust. They know who they're working with. We give them the phone number that they should always call to, have questions or verify information. So technically, the only time we would send wiring instructions to a buyer without calling them first is when, they're traveling or they're not available. And then we'll say, hey, please call us before wiring any money to verify.
So in my experience, when it comes to wire fraud, it's always, hey, beware of this email and or this phone call, and make sure that the information is correct. Are there any other creative ways that these scammers are diverting these wires, or is it pretty much always the same thing, the same trick?
It's pretty much the same trick.
Okay, all right.
They pose as the title company or the realtor, and their email looks exactly like it's coming from me or from you. And
instead of Fidelity Inc., it's Fidelity AZ or something like that. But it's like some type of rendition of something that looks legitimate.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So some of the things that I look at to help avoid being, a victim of fraud myself, is I always pay incredibly close attention to the sender's email address, looking for just a different letter, and it might be Fidelity Title at Gmail. You guys would never send anything from a Gmail. The logo typically, when it's a fraud email, typically the logo is a little more grainy. They don't have that high resolution logo. But anytime there's a hyperlink, I always just tell everybody, just always hover over the hyperlink, because it'll pop up where that is linked to, and that's generally a telltale sign for me, because then all of a sudden now I'm not going to Fidelity Title, or I'm not going to whatever website. I'm being diverted somewhere else.
So how does this is kind of on the same plane here, but how you get those people, hey, I want to buy your home, I'll send you over a check, and then you get a check in the mail, and it's if you actually look closely at it, you're like, this is bunk. But the whole idea is they want you to deposit it, and then before it clears or the bank is onto it, then you're cutting money back to them, or
right.
I mean, I've never gone deep enough down that rabbit hole, because I just I'm like, all right, yeah, you have too many red flags. We're gonna totally cut this conversation off. Are they doing any of that with title, or are they not ballsy enough for that?
No, we see those as well. Usually quick cash transactions, and usually the red flag on that is the buyer wants to deposit the whole entire purchase price instead of just the earnest money deposit.
Right, that's what it is.
And then next thing you know, you take in a cashier's check, and the next day they say, oh, we're canceling, and hopefully the escrow officer is intelligent enough not to immediately refund that money, and hopefully verifies with the bank that cashier's check wasn't a fraudulent check.
All right, we are talking wire fraud with our good friend Bianca Lemmons from Fidelity National Title. If you'd like to learn more about the subject, ways that you can protect yourselves, or the ways that we, as a team of real estate wealth managers, the ways that we protect our clients and our listeners, all you got to do is text the word WIRE to 623AZ-RECON. That's WIRE to 623AZ-RECON. It sounded silly when it came out of my mouth. Why would anyone want more information about wire fraud? But
I think a lot of people could benefit from it. I mean, like, if we're talking about fail safes and keeping your eye out for things, because I mean, it's so common for us. We have this conversation.
Right.
I mean, it's in boilerplate on a half dozen documents that we go through, and it's on just about every single document that it goes through on title. So, and especially if somebody feels like they might be getting scammed. And so, I guess that being said, like, what are some telltale signs, and how can you as an individual make sure that you're kind of staying on top of that?
Well, again, I think it's just so important, even if you think you haven't been scammed in any way through email, just pick up the phone at a trusted number, call your escrow officer at a trusted number. That's truly the foolproof way.
So what if you have been scammed?
Well, the minute you know you've been scammed, well, first of all, we take protocols too. So when we're wiring funds to somebody, when we're wiring out, we always pick up the phone and call the seller and say, hey, your funds have been wired. You should expect those in your account. But before we even do that, we've already verified that information verbally with your client on the phone. So again, we're not going, but the timing of the wirings is very important, because if a buyer says, I wired my closing funds to you, if I don't have those within a couple hours, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling the buyer and saying, could you please verify those account information once again with me? I want to make sure you wired the money to the right account. And if we find that they were scammed or, email phishing occurred, we immediately, number one, reach out to our corporate headquarters, who basically handles this matter. We contact the receiving bank immediately, and the account will be shut down. That's usually what happens. Those are the first steps.
So how much time between sending it to a fraudulent scammer and is there amount of time where it's nope, it's 3 hours old, you're screwed?
It really depends on the time of day that the wire was generated. So if you're wiring out at right before the Federal Reserve cutoff on a Friday afternoon, you've got very little time to try and stop that wire. If you wire it out on Friday morning, you maybe have an hour or so, hopefully, to reach out to that sending bank and get that account shut down and that wire halted.
Wow.
All right, Bianca Lemmons with Fidelity National Title. The topic is wire fraud. What is Fidelity Title doing currently to protect our clients from wire fraud?
So I don't mean to sound repetitive, but basically communicating with the clients directly, making sure that they understand what wire fraud is and who can be a victim and how you become a victim of it. And education is key. And then, of course, just making sure that we're sending wiring instructions securely. So, I know sometimes it's a hassle to open secure emails and create those passwords, but again, it's for your protection, because when account information is transmitted unsecurely via email, that's when hackers can get in, and that's where they can start seeing everything. So we send secure wiring instructions, and we encourage the parties to call and verify that information before wiring. We're also verifying information at trusted numbers before we wire. So there's a lot of steps involved. 20 years ago, I didn't worry about all of this. I could just close transactions, right?
I didn't worry about an inappropriate picture of myself popping up on social media. The world was different 20 years ago,
sure
Bianca.
What's the biggest wire fraud you've seen? Maybe through Fidelity or maybe through somebody else in the industry that you know?
I don't know the actual dollar amount. Fortunately, Fidelity here in Maricopa, we have not been a victim as far as when it comes to loss. No. And again, I feel like that goes back because we have such qualified employees within Fidelity here, and the education that we get. We've diverted wire frauds, and we've recognized when we've received a fraudulent email. Lots of times the grammar is not perfect, or they say something
well,
like...
shoot, if you base it on grammar,
Yeah.
my emails would be
Poor
flagged.
Well, like for one that one of my escrow officers diverted not too long ago, it said, it was asking for redundant information. My escrow officer's like, wait a minute, I just spoke to the realtor. We didn't have that conversation. So that was a red flag. She picked up the phone and said, from moving forward, no email conversation on this transaction. It all must be on the phone.
All right,
So-
if you woke up tomorrow and you were the emperor of the world, or the empress of the
Empress.
world, and you could just assign any type of punishment to somebody committing this type of fraud, what would it be?
Oh, my. I don't know if I could say that.
Drawn and quartered, head on a pike. Go straight medieval on them.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to go there, Mike.
Okay, Ryan, if you woke up and you were empress of the world.
Let's keep it with Bianca.
All right, this is Bianca Lemmons, Fidelity National Title. We are talking wire fraud. If you'd like to learn more and I would just say this for our listeners, one of the advantages with Fidelity National Title, I don't want our listeners to think that we're just talking about Maricopa County, Arizona, and we're the only victims of wire fraud. This is on a national, if not a global level, and Fidelity National Title is all over America. So when you are buying a home or selling a home and you have that option to decide which title and escrow company you're going to use, we can't recommend Fidelity National Title any more than we do. That's why we've partnered with them and so forth. So when you do text the word WIRE to 623-AZ-RECON and we help you sell or help you buy a house, you're going to hear the name Fidelity National Title pop up, and you're going to see Bianca's name written into that contract. Thank you, Bianca, for joining us. If you'd like some more information, all you got to do is text the word WIRE to 623-AZ-RECON. That's WIRE to 623-AZ-RECON.
Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate 401k Show. If you want more information on how to build wealth, click on the link or text us at 623-297-3266. That's 623-AZ-RECON.